conversations for the past months. And then Nicholas, who is Jamaican but lives in the UK and practices in the UK, coming back and forth, saying, I'd love to do something for the church community. So here we are today. And we are doing 3 workshops, one here today at Fellowship Tabernacle, one at Fellowship Tabernacle in Mandeville, and then at Freshbird Ministries in Montego Bay, 40 Market Street. The clear instructions were, you need to do one per county, and that's how I followed. Initially, when we started out, I said, we'll charge. The Lord says, no, don't charge, make it free. If people want to do a free will offering, then they can do that in terms of being a part of what we're doing. So welcome. And a verse of scripture that comes to mind that says, the sons of Issachar understood the times and were able to instruct persons as to what they need to be doing. And in a way, I see myself as that person in the church community. A lot of people know me. I've done different stints in church community, but I do believe that right at the present time, in terms of all of what's happening in Jamaica, the church has the answer for a lot of things. But we need to become even more proactive and get back in the public square if we're going to influence what is happening. So again, welcome. We're just going to open in prayer. I'm just going to do a brief introduction of Nicholas, and we're going to go straight ahead. Let's pray. And I'm going to ask our elder in the church. Father Bruce, just come and open in prayer for us. He's an elder to me, even though I'm an elder. So just welcome.
Can we just stand and Almighty God, our Father, we thank you for bringing us, all of us here safely. And we ask that you would really hasten the steps of those who are on their way. We ask for your presence, your spirit of wisdom, insight, understanding to be with us, be with our presenters, and give us clear guidance so that at the end of the day, you might be glorified in what proceeds from today's activity. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Ruth, sir. You don't give up, Pastor Mike, because he has an endless gospel that he needs to share. But thank you, Elder Fletcher, for sharing with us this morning. Yes. That's too much honor. That is the challenge. Bruce Olson. Yeah, so what we'll be sharing today, and I must acknowledge those who are not only from the church community, but there are a couple of lawyers here, a lot. I know somebody who's in the accounting, because there's not a lot of information out there. I'm not going to knock the government. I think they could have done a better job in terms of preparing us, but just that if you didn't know, the data protection is a companion to the NIBS. Most people haven't picked that up. The data protection is companion to the NIBS, and we said a lot of things about the NIBS, and remember it went to the Supreme Court. They overruled it in the format that it was, but it is live. And so we need to understand that reality. So I'm gonna now introduce to you my friend. He said we can go into business together. I don't know that may work. I mean, he's a pastor and he's a lawyer, so I don't know that will work out still, but his son works. He brings the cash. They very collect money. So Nicholas, pastor, is Jamaican by birth, and you're Avalon. Avalon is in St. Anne, which is where originated, went to Stax, and then after finishing Stax, he migrated to the UK where he was trained as a lawyer, he has his LLB, but more importantly, is somebody who has had the experience in terms of the law as it impacts the UK and so on. And he's had numerous positions working as in that capacity in some huge companies. So he brings that wealth of experience. But another thing with Nicholas is that he has been helping to train persons in government and persons in the private sector in terms of how we are going to work with the data protection, but even more so the implications for you. So without further ado, I invite my friend, kingdom person, Mr. Nicholas Foster, to come and do the presentations for us. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you, Pastor Percy. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you. So, Pastor, I can collect the money and you can bless it. And, joint approach. Okay, so before I go into the Data Protection Act, you mentioned in terms of the history of the company, in terms of AVLA and my roots. So you gave a bit of a clue at the start that AVLA is named after a district in St. Anne. Can anyone tell me the name of that district? What was that? So the district is not called AVLA, but if you look at the name, its clue is there. Did you say Alva? That's correct. Alva. Where is Alva? Yeah, well, no, in St. Anne. But no. Where was that? So it's on the way to, if you're traveling towards Bob Marley's mausoleum in 9 miles, and you're heading from Brownstown, then you'll go to Alexandria, or Charlton, as some people would refer to it as, and then you'll go on, and then Alva is one of the districts along that route. So I grew up in St. Anne, and we used to go to Alva to play cricket on Easter Monday, and other times, some really, really good times we've had. So as Pastor Percy said, I've traveled to the UK and pursue further education, qualified as a lawyer, UK barrister. In Jamaica, the title is obviously attorney of law, but in the UK, there are 2 different categories of lawyers. One is a solicitor who sits on the high street and receives clients and then make reference or referral to the barrister. The barrister is an advocate in court who speaks on behalf of the client. So I was called to the UK bar in 2002. Subsequently, I acquired my master's in information rights law and practice. And this is important because it was in the early embryonic stages of the data protection developments in Europe. So you will hear me make reference to the General Data Protection Regulations, or GDPR for short. So that started in terms of the drafting phases from around 2009 onwards. So when I was doing my master's, we were discussing the draft legislation. I've also currently work as an associate instructor part-time with the London School of Economics and Political Science on their data law and governance course, and encompassing around over 15 years of experience working with data protection laws across the UK and Europe, including being the Group Data Protection Officer and Head of Information Governance, one of the largest provider of healthcare and education services in Europe with over 110 legal entities and over 10,000 employees. And recently, which I need to add to this list, I've acquired a certification with the International Association of Privacy Professionals as CIPP. That's a Certified Information Privacy Practitioner. So I'm saying all of that to give you assurance about my experience in this field, where I do not approach data protection from a theoretical perspective, but also from a practical, applied approach. I have worked with these laws in the jurisdictions which actually founded or generated these laws. The Data Protection Act in Jamaica is modeled on the UK 1998 Data Protection Act. If you read both legislations side by side, you will see it's around 70% word for word. And the rest really is from the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulations of Europe, and other local elements to fit Jamaica's local context. So on this Monday morning, you could be busy with your life or enjoying this lovely sunshine instead of being here, listening to or getting involved in data protection matters. So why? Why are we talking about data protection? Why is this important to you? Well, just think for a second how we transact, how we do business today. So especially after COVID, where you would transact with your bank, lots of people do, virtually online. You will shop, people shop from Amazon and other companies by sending an email, and you'll receive information that you purchase via a website. So lots of information is collected. NIDS was made reference to earlier, collected by the government, collected by private sectors, collected across different areas of the market. That information is collected virtually, digitally. It means that that information is more susceptible to hacking, cyber hacking. Last year, September, the Financial Services Commission suffered a cyber hack, cyber data breach, where information was compromised. And that's information that's shared by other financial institutions. Scamming is on the rise. It is very prevalent in Jamaica. That information could be exposed. So the information that is collected, that information is your information, is my information, is your family's information. But also historically, organizations before this digital information age collected several copious amount of information on paper. That information is also subject to infiltration or exposure by persons with nefarious intentions. So that's why the Data Protection Act is important. It's really about the development in technology and the new challenges to protect your information, your name, your health data, your financial data, your family's data, your sensitive information that you'd rather to share only with your close family members or your pastor or your bank and no one else. And also it's around creating trust, because the church needs to have trust with its membership. The banks and other organizations would need to have trust with their customers. And in order to enhance and foster this relationship of trust, it's important for you to understand that there are systems in place to protect your information when that information is shared or when that information is collected. And thirdly, it's really around giving you and I control over your information. So in other words, if a company is asking you for, say, for example, how long have you been married? How many children do you have? What was your grandmother's name? Who were they married to? You're starting to wonder, why do you need that information? Why do you need to know? I'm just purchasing an item from you. That's not relevant. You see, so it's around giving you control over the information about you that you share with your church, with your bank, with your employer. But also it's saying that if you share your information, you've got certain rights. Once that information is shared, to ask for a copy of that information. And if there were to be any misuse or abuse of that information, you can take that company to court for failing to protect your information and your personal data rights. So against that backdrop, as I've mentioned, around about 2016, the European Union introduced this global, well, so it's mainly for the European Union, but it's also impact beyond its borders to other countries across the world. And the act or the legislation was implemented in 2018 on the 25th of May across Europe, all 28 members of the European Union, and that was before the UK exited. Brexit is, as you know, the phraseology. So since that time, around 80 countries across the world have introduced some form of data protection legislation, from India to China to Russia, Brazil, Nigeria. And in 2019, Barbados, closer to home in this region, introduced their data protection legislation. And in July 2020, the Jamaica government introduced the Data Protection Act of 2020. Right, okay, just a second, some technological issue here. Okay. So speak amongst yourselves in the meantime. No, there's a previous one.
From there, like what we did.
So to close it down.
Yeah, you don't have to, just go straight to the email and launch it from that link.
Even from the WhatsApp.
No, but get to your email. Remember when you registered, it sent you an email.
And we're just trying to sort out the liaison between what's happening on Zoom and what's happening here. But he's been through a couple of slides already. If you were following on your handout, you'd have picked that up. But the global expansion and the early things, yeah.
Yeah, I could use that. Okay, right. So what I'll do, whilst that's being rectified, I will hopefully liaise with an IT person at the back who should be following me. So as I was saying, that since 2018, around 80 countries across the world have implemented some form of data protection laws. In 2019, I've mentioned Barbados, in 2020 in Jamaica. And that law became effective on the 1st of December last year. There was a 2-year transition period from the point of time when the Jamaica Information Commissioner was appointed at the end of December in 2021. So there was a 2-year which ended in December 2023. But given that several companies across the country in the private sector lobbied the government to ask for more time to allow them to get up to speed with compliance, the government introduced a further extension to the implementation period. And there was a 6-month grace period for that law to be introduced. And so the 6-month grace period ends on the 31st of this month. So it means from the 1st of June onwards, all companies are expected to be in full compliance with the Data Protection Act. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. Previous? Okay. So what is the Data Protection Act? And why is it relevant? So the Act is around the protecting of personal data. Yeah, I've given some examples in terms of what personal data is, and I'll be delving into further examples shortly. Yeah, the protection or the protecting of your personal data. And also to give you autonomy over your information, over my information, over your family's information. And also, it's a mechanism in place to minimize or mitigate and guard against risk to information, as in your information. So the law says companies that collect information should have certain security systems and standards in place to protect that information from unauthorized access or inappropriate use or misuse of that information. And we'll delve into some of those shortly when we talk about the sort of security requirements. But so, for example, if in the church, what's most relevant here is that information is collected, for example, on a visitor's card. That's someone's personal information. It may be the name, Mary Jane, and this is their email address. So where is that information stored? Is it on paper? And who has access to that information? Thank you. I think we're back on live. Always give credit to the IT technicians. Thank you. Who has access to that information? And you know, where is it being kept? And you know, who is being shared with? So personal data, sort of catch-all terminology and definition of it, is any information relating to a living person or someone who has been deceased for under 30 years. So any information that relates to that or those category of persons. So it could be their name, their age, their height, their race, any information relating to a living person or someone who has been deceased. So if Mas Joe passed away 25 years ago and he had, I don't know, 2 million in the bank and he had 20 children, that information relates to someone who has been deceased. And if Mas Joe can be identified, or Mary Jane, from that information, then that's their personal information. But also any expression of opinion about someone. So if you, for example, be at church or at work, were to describe someone. So you know that guy who made a presentation last week, Monday, and he was wearing this shirt and he had this funny accent and he was from wherever, yeah? You are describing someone and it's likely someone would be able to identify that's me, right? It's an expression of opinion, yeah? You don't need to use my name, right? So you can identify someone without naming them. Because the name Nicholas Foster, if you type that in Google, you will see maybe about 20 or so that comes up on the first page, Nicholas Foster. Most of them will be white, but you'll see a few black ones, yeah? And so a name is not the only means of identifying someone. You can describe someone by their height, by their profession, by their race, and other identifiers, right? That would cause someone reading that information or hearing that information to know that you're talking about a particular person who is distinguishable from others. Yeah? So it's any expression of opinion. The expression of opinion doesn't have to be positive. It doesn't need to be accurate. It's an expression of opinion about anyone. So therefore, what does that mean? We should be careful what we write about people in a professional capacity, right? Because once that information is recorded, and that could identify someone, if that information is misused and goes into the wrong hand, we are in breach of the Data Protection Act. But also the spoken words, when we speak about someone, Again, that's someone is overhearing that. So who is actually, who are we talking to? And are we sharing that information with people who have a right to know that information? So the Act talks about different types of personal data. So some of the examples I've given would be name, email address, postal address, date of birth, etc. Those would be standard, non-personal, personal data. But there are some other types of personal data which you can see on the screen. So personal data that is, it describes someone's race or ethnicity, political opinion, religious or philosophical beliefs, health, physical health or mental health, sexual orientation or sex life, or biometric data. So it could be someone's fingerprint or eye scan, etc., voice, etc., biometric data, or criminal offenses, etc. Can anyone tell me, why do you think this category, is important? Some of these examples that you can see.
Can affect you in terms of job.
Yes? Absolutely. So the answer was that it can affect someone in getting a job or opportunities or otherwise. That's absolutely correct. And that's because this type of information can be used to discriminate against persons or against people. Years ago, maybe 30 or so years ago in Jamaica, someone's political opinion was very controversial. Less so these days, thankfully. But people, my grandmother used to tell me the stories of when she went to vote in Kingston, that she would not disclose who she voted for, because that was a controversial issue. In some parts of the world, religious beliefs are very contentious, not so much in Jamaica, because maybe 90 to 95% of the country would associate themselves as Christian. But what about the minorities? People who are not Christians, and may have certain religious beliefs or views which are not shared by the wider society. Is that information is protected, it's sensitive personal data. And therefore we should be careful how we collect and how we store and share that information. Philosophical beliefs, two questions. Go ahead, is there a mic over there? Okay, go ahead with your question. Absolutely, you do. Thank you for your question. So the question for those who are listening online was that there's a school and you collect certain types of information about immunization, etc. So that would be medical or health related information, which is sensitive personal data. That's correct. There was another question. Go ahead, please. Good question. Right. So the question was about how would someone's criminal offenses be discriminatory if they were to be hired in terms of getting a job. So that's on the assumption that because someone has a criminal record, they are not employable. It really depends on what the criminal record was for and how long ago they sort of incurred, the penalty which caused them to have a criminal record. And so, for example, it depends on what your employment policy would be. Yeah. So some organizations, for example, is it that you would not employ anyone with a criminal record? And I'm sure there's a law in Jamaica which will list certain rehabilitation periods where certain criminal offenses would be spent, so for example, after maybe, 20 years or 15 years, that's no longer a live issue. Yeah. So everyone should have the opportunity to be rehabilitated. Yeah. So that's the. There's a mic coming your way.
I'm not going to stress it, but shouldn't there be a defined period, such as where you have a deceased person less than 30 years? Should not there be a defined period in terms of that aspect of the data protection?
Correct. But it's not for the Data Protection Act to prescribe that period necessarily. So the period is there for the definition of personal data, right? But it's not there to really prescribe periods for, health records, sexual orientation, etc. There would be other laws, and the Data Protection Act should be read in conjunction and alongside with other laws in Jamaica. It's not a law that stands alone, right? It's part of the holistic legislative approach. So it really depends on your sector, and someone's criminal offense is relevant to an employment application in terms of the questions about that. But it's not relevant to another person who is not employing that individual, because that information is private to them, unless it's in the public interest to share that information. That information really is between the individual, law enforcement, probation, and whomever they wish to share that information with. That's why it's protected, sensitive information. Thank you for your question. By the way, we'll be taking the slot for questions at the end. Yeah, but thank you for your questions. Okay. So your response absolutely was spot on in terms of why we need these different categories of sensitive personal data. Philosophical beliefs, that's an interesting one. Can you think about any sort of philosophical beliefs that you think should be protected? So not religious, philosophical. Not religious, just there's a mic behind you.
No, it's just that belief systems have a way of intersecting. So, for example, somebody may say, I don't believe in religion, but their beliefs are really like a religion, and it dictates how they live and the laws they enforce and those kinds of things. So philosophical beliefs has a way of masking very impactful things.
Yeah, those are personal to individuals, and even someone who doesn't believe in religion, you're right. So, as I said, 95% of Jamaica would be Christians, right? There are some people who are agnostic, right, who just do not believe in a God, yeah, or atheists, yeah. And it's still a religious belief, yeah? The fact that you don't believe in religion is a religious belief in itself, right? So that information is protected too. So it means that that person should not be discriminated against, and that information should be collected and stored and shared properly. Okay, so certain definitions that's relevant to the church, and obviously I'm aware that some of you here, obviously you would be employed elsewhere, or you may be employers yourselves. So that the Act has this category of persons or entities which are described as a data controller, right? So this is not an IT terminology, right? So it means a data controller, it means that if in a professional, religious capacity, etc., you collect and you decide whether to collect personal data and how that information is collected, why it's collected, and how it's used, you are a data controller. And the law applies to you. The law does not apply to persons using personal data in a personal capacity or household, which is the terminology. So for example, that's why people are allowed to share information about their families and friends on Facebook, on social media, etc., because that's for personal use. But if personal data is collected for business use, yeah, in the professional capacity, you would fall under the control, and the ambit of the law, which means that it would apply to you, and you should ensure that you abide by all the requirements of the Data Protection Act. That's why I am doing this presentation today at the church, because the church is a data controller. It collects personal data about its members, about the visitors, etc. Yeah.
So somebody down Carnation Market who collects information on their customers and have a number for them, they're a data controller?
Yes. Because the market, the vendor is acting in a business capacity, right? They're a sole trader, yeah? They're collecting information about the customer. They're a data controller, yeah?
Go on, boss.
Yeah. So what the Data Protection Act does, it doesn't prevent. There will be nothing I'm saying here that prevents the collection of personal data. What the law does, it provides a mechanism, a framework for doing so in a transparent, fair, lawful, ethical, and secure manner. Yeah? That's all it does. So if you collect information currently for legitimate business purposes, the law does not stop you from doing so in the future. The law says you ought to do so provided you meet certain criteria, certain checklists, things that you ought to tick off, right? So in other words, if you're collecting my data, I should know, right? And if you're sending me market information, I should consent. And if you're sharing my information with another organization, you should tell me. Go ahead with your question.
So, good morning. One of the easiest ways of communicating with our members these days is we form WhatsApp groups. Okay, so now when we have a church WhatsApp group, whether it's a small group or it's the entire church in the WhatsApp group, etc., it means that any one person in the group now has access to the information of all other persons in the group. And I cannot control that because they are all members of the group. And I don't know when Elder Bruce is going to decide to look through the group and find Sister Jones and Sister Barbara, call them privately and offer them something to sell. How does that work itself out? Should we just shut down these WhatsApp groups?
Absolutely. And that's a fantastic question. So, yeah, so let me answer that. Is it along the same lines? Yeah, go ahead.
There is a way that WhatsApp
There's a mic.
broadcast
Use-
rather than a group list.
Sorry, go ahead.
You use a broadcast list rather than a group list. The broadcast list does not allow members of those groups to be able to access information. They don't even know who else is on the list.
Absolutely. Okay. So thank you for answering that. Because, okay, so it's really ensuring that you familiarize yourselves with the privacy settings for these apps and these websites, for example. Yeah, again, even taking one step back, how do you protect your own information? Right? So on Facebook, how many people bother to change the settings on Facebook so that if I'm your friend, I do not see your friends list? That's possible, right? Most people allow everyone else to see exactly who their friends are on Facebook, and also the third category and fourth category friends are. So I could go to someone's Facebook page, see, okay, they've got 100 friends, but I could click on Mary Jane to see her friends, and then her friends list to see the third removed friends, which I shouldn't be able to see. Because I could be searching for someone. I could be a journalist. I could be a private investigator, right? So it's really about taking these basic precautions. What the Data Protection Act does is, your good question is to flag and to highlight these issues, right? So have you changed the settings? Okay. You're sharing this group list. Have you told the members that you know why you're collecting their numbers? You know, have you given them the right to opt out, right? And if, for example, when you send an email, again, do you use BCC when you're sending to 50 persons so that everyone else on that distribution list cannot see the email addresses of everyone else? It's the same principle, yeah? So the act does not prevent lawful, legitimate use of data. It does not do that. It ensures it's done so in a secure, transparent, and safe manner. So the data processor is someone who is acting on behalf of the data controller. So remember, the data processor decides, I'm going to collect, this is why I'm going to collect, and I'm going to store it for this period and for how long, right? If they were to hire an IT person, for example, we've got these great guys who are helping us today. If they are from an outside company, they are a data processor because they are accessing the church's data, right? So the church will be the data controller. They subcontract or have a contractor, most likely it's a data processor if they are accessing or handling personal data. The data subject would be you and me, right? So we are all data subjects, and sometimes in different capacities. So we could be a data subject at church, at work, in relation to your bank, in relation to your social media company or company, your online shopping company, whichever. We are data subjects because we've got personal data that we share or that other organizations collect or use or stores about us. Data processing, again, this is not an IT terminology. Data processing is any activity that is undertaken in relation to personal data. So by virtue of collecting, storing, using, sharing, looking at, amending, deleting, moving from one place to another, you are processing personal data. So what does that mean? That in terms of the church, if you are collecting it, everyone else who handles it or looks at it should have a right, authority to do so. It shouldn't be just left unattended for the cleaner to come in and sort of wade through a notebook or your membership list or whatever to see and to knows about and what's going on. Yeah, that information should be under lock and key, or if it's on a computer, it should be password protected. Yeah, if it's on a camera, it should be either deleted when it's no longer needed, back up to a laptop where it's secured. And if someone is using that camera, it should only be used by a person authorized to do so, and it shouldn't be removed from sight. If it's on a mobile phone, it should be password protected. It should also be stored, encrypted, and that's what the Data Protection Act is for, right? And by doing so, we're protecting not just our membership information. You're protecting your asset as an organization. You're protecting your business information. You're protecting your financial information. You're protecting your reputation, right? You're increasing and enhancing your credibility in the community. Right, so what type of personal information does the church collect? So for example, these are certain questions I'm going to tease around. So during a wedding ceremony, can you tell me, anyone, what information would the church collect during a wedding ceremony that's personal to someone? Yeah? The names and the guests, right? So the guest list. Okay, thank you. But back, birth certificate of the bride and groom, not the guests, right? Because if you start asking for the guest birth certificate, I'll be worried. Family connections, right?
The person is divorced, yes.
Right, divorce, right. How many times divorce? Let me not tease that. Occupation.
Father's name.
Father's name. You know, I always wonder, why is the mother's name not on the wedding certificate?
I don't know.
I was doing a sort of genealogy search of my family history, and you'll always see the father's name on the wedding certificate, not the mother's name.
Right.
This is scene. Sorry, didn't get that. Seed. Okay, that's the reason why. Okay, right. Okay, so on the wedding certificate. So absolutely, all that information is personal to those people. Okay, funeral.
That's the person dead and the deceased, just the deceased.
Just the deceased, okay. Would you not normally have some information about the next of kin or family information? Cause of death?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, because the cause of death, that's health information. That's sensitive personal data. Remember, that information is covered by the Act if that person died less than 30 years prior. What about during counseling?
That's everything.
Everything.
But ethically, it's covered as a counselor. It's under lock and key.
Bad memory? Yeah,
Bad memory.
you're right. So it's an answer to that. Someone says, just about anything. And that's correct, you know. And that's why this act is so relevant to the church. Because you have so much, if you like, authority over people, you know, and the people come to the church for refuge, for solace, for comfort, you know, and people divulge. Some people have no filter and they will tell you everything and anything, you know. And so the issue now is that they rely on you to protect them, right? Not just them, they protect them. They have faith in you because they believe you are a man of or woman of God. So therefore, you will protect them and treat them well, right? I was reading the sign over there, live, love, win to, give to. You know, people come to the church for these reasons, you know. So really, even more than the government, the church will collect information about people. So baptism, what else?
Date of conversion and name.
So the religious belief, date of conversion, yeah, address. What about christening? Is it?
But you get more information because you have date, where they were born, mother's name, father's name, godparents.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So you're collecting third-party information too,
Yeah.
not just for the baby, but for the parents, like I say, godmother, godfather, etc. You know, and lastly, worship service. Business card, yeah. Someone's name, email address, telephone number.
Decision cards.
Yeah. That's a really good question. That will probably let's pick up on that one at the end. That's such a good question because not just at the altar, but also during worship services when we live stream services.
Yes.
During
Facial recognition.
you know, yeah, there's facial recognition, and even during this seminar, again, what information are we sharing via the World Wide Web with anyone, and we are identifying people. So it's about all of that, those principles that we follow. Go ahead.
We're
Just
getting
waiting for the
some
mic.
questions on Zoom also, so begin to take those.
Yes.
Let me do this quickly. I was always concerned when you said that regarding the worship service, and when someone's has to introduce someone, like we did this morning, right? And they give sometimes quite a bit of information about the person.
Yeah.
And I'm sometimes saying to myself, that's too much right now.
Yeah.
Because it's being streamed and everybody's hearing, and maybe something is said that that person didn't want anybody else really to know at that point in time.
Yeah.
So would that qualify?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? And then it highlights these things for us to just think about, you know, and we're doing it in love. We're doing it because we're excited. We're glad to see this person, and we welcome them to our church. There's a speaker. Yeah, we want to share. We want to give as much. but it's really what is necessary, what is relevant for the purpose in which you are sharing that information and to whom you're sharing that information. Because you'll share different types of information or degrees depending on who you're talking to for different reasons. So we'll come back to that with the CC video at the end. Is there another question there? Go ahead. We're taking questions from online.
Right. Someone was asking, in the case of a criminal record, for example, a sex offender, is that protected information, or do citizens have a right to know?
Right. So again, as I said, the Data Protection Act should be read in conjunction with other laws in Jamaica, right? So are there laws in terms of criminal laws that will govern the sharing of certain types of criminal offenses? So for the example that you gave in terms of sex offenses, everyone wouldn't be, it'd be very hard to explain why everyone should know that someone has a sex-related offense or offenses. That's not relevant to everyone. No, there was a public interest test, of course, yeah? So for example, it may be that individual has moved into a community and is living in a block of flats where there are children, or that individual is working in the school. There's a basic school that the lady mentioned earlier. If that individual is working with vulnerable people, then it's relevant to share that information. But we wouldn't share the information because he has a criminal offense. It doesn't mean that people lose all of their right to privacy just because he has an offense, you see. So it really depends, what do other laws say on the subject in terms of sharing criminal offenses and reasons. What the Data Protection Act does, it says if you are processing personal data, you must have a lawful basis or ground for doing so. And one of them could be consent. In the absence of consent, it may be that there's another law that says you can do it. Yeah, and these are further conversations we could have. Okay. So those are some of the answers from the questions I was asking. What's not on the list? Okay, video image, you picked up on that. Photo image as well, someone picked up on that. Let's move on. So by virtue of that discussion and question and answer session, it shows that the Data Protection Act does apply to the church. We mentioned worship service, baptism, christening, wedding, funeral, counseling. What about charity events? Also, and also donations, right? So if you are, for example, sending emails to different companies or persons to ask them to sponsor an event, or you're purchasing, I don't know, transport, you want donations. The emails that you send are marketing emails. They are no different to when you receive a text message or an email from a company selling you handbags or clothes or other items. The Act governs the sending and communication of marketing information. So therefore, you should follow certain rules when sending marketing information, including request donations to persons or to entities. So, go ahead. Right. So the marketing type of information, as I said, is if you request a donation from me, from an individual, from a company. It's a form of direct marketing, yeah? And the act govern direct marketing communication. So therefore, you should only send marketing information. So for example, if the person is a member of the church, yeah, you can do that. If the person is not a member of the church, you can do with their consent. Or if they have not given you consent, when you send it, you should give them the right to opt out. In other words, to tell you to stop doing it. Because maybe this person finds it annoying that you always keep the right to ask me for money. I'm not a religious person. I do not believe in this church or this denomination. So why are you writing to me? Yeah? Thank you. So information is collected about persons on, we mentioned the visitor's card, the prior request form, marriage certificate, death certificate. You got a question? Go ahead.
I'm concerned on, just a regular live stream that we do at church. How do we handle that?
Yeah, thank you. So I'll take your question with the other question about the, excuse me, can we get some charger? It says my battery is running low and that's not charging. No, yeah, that's fine. Thank you. We also collect information in terms of meeting minutes. We've got business meetings or membership meetings, etc. We've mentioned baptism certificate, Christian certificate, donation documentation, tithes and offering documentation, video platform, 2 questions on that, camera, phone, CCTV, and laptop. Anything else? Can you think about? Where information is collected about persons, that's not on this list. Go ahead. Google platform. Yes, in the church database, right. And that information is saved in the cloud. Yeah. So the cloud is your data processor, the cloud provider, a Google platform, right? So why is the Data Protection Act important? So we know that the act is relevant, but why is it important? So it's really, if we didn't have this law in place, and I will mention the grace period that ends on the 31st of this month. So there's an imperative for the church to take this seriously, because we refer to the parable that Jesus gave of the Good Samaritan. And we all know the story quite well from Sunday school or, other sources. But in terms of the legal context, what extrapolated from the principles of that story is around what's referred to as the neighborhood principle. Because remember, the man asked Jesus, then Lord, who is my neighbor? Right? So the answer is not just the person who's living next door to you, right? And it's not necessarily the person who is the closest house, but really it's about anyone you're likely to come into contact with. That's your neighbor. So therefore, to take it one step further, it means that we've got a duty of care, not to undertake any act as a positive act, not to do anything that would harm someone. And we also got this duty of care to refrain, to avoid doing anything that would cause anyone harm. So that's very principle. That's the principle. That the legislation, it's not because it's a law and it's coming into effect, etc. It's really about, let's say the discussion here, people come to the church for solace, for support. And it's really saying we've got a duty of care to protect them, to protect vulnerable people, to protect information, not to do them harm. And I'll give you some example in a minute into how information misuse can be harmful to people. And so it's around this moral imperative to protect other people. And protect information means protecting them from harm. So what are some of the risks? Okay, and before I give you the answers, let's have a conversation. What are some of the risks for failing to protect someone's data? Can you give me anything that could happen as a result of not protecting information or misusing information? Go ahead. Yes? Right. So give me an example, a scenario of the wrong hands.
The police?
Not necessarily. Police is not the wrong hands, unless you see them as the wrong hands in Jamaica. It could be the right hands. Go ahead.
Experience where there was there was this young man who actually came into our office, looked at our church list, directory list. This predates digital stuff and all of that, and actually called, was it one or two persons, you know, soliciting donations and stuff from them, but he, for himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he had access to numbers which he would not have normally.
And how did he get access?
Because he came in the office and the list was just there.
What could have been done to prevent that?
Could have been locked away.
Yeah.
But, you know, that was, wow. Oh yeah, he was working there actually.
Right.
But he never had, he could not have done that.
Yeah.
It was there.
So that's wrong hands. But also that could have ended up quite differently. He could have seen from that list someone that he recognizes. Yeah. And maybe he has, do you use terminology, has a beef with them? Do you use that here? Right. He has a beef with that person. He wants to settle it. Right. And he called them. Yeah. And he pretends to be the pastor, pretends to be a brother, you know, someone's with good intention, and cause them harm physically. Yeah. So those are some of the practical examples, just by failing to lock away a list. Any other examples can you think about?
Well, I had a situation where someone was ministering to someone in the service and kind of just speaking about some things, you know, bringing prophetic word kind of thing. And of course, the person was being filmed, so the streaming. And the person was very upset afterwards that although what was being said was not necessarily was true, they didn't want that to be said publicly and for them to be streamed while that was happening, and really affected the person's loyalty to the church.
Yeah, see, unfortunately, and of course, the church overarching mission is to win souls for the kingdom come, and it's about to grow its congregation and membership. And that one example would then cause a domino effect and spread sort of a bad news about the church, affects the church reputation, and affects the church mission and blunt its message. Go ahead, Pastor Percy. Okay. Was there another scenario that you wanted to give?
Thank you. I don't know if anyone sees, but it's going to be a great challenge to churches in the question of neighbor. Sorry. it's relative in the sense that if you, as a pastor who has information on someone's sexual orientation and that person now wants to marry to someone of what the Bible prescribes, then it becomes challenging for the pastor in terms of how do you speak to this? Because then now that person can actually sue the church. So it's becoming a technical, it's going to be a great challenge to the church, all right?
That's a really good observation. Thank you. Because what you've highlighted there is the conflict, the collision between your doctrine and the law, right? Because what you're saying, and we're not going to end up a debate about this, but it is a viewpoint, and it's maybe different in certain churches in certain parts of the world where someone's sexuality, there is a doctrinal interpretation that that's against the will of God. Yeah. Whereas the law is saying we're not interested in what's the will of God or not. We're just interested in what is the law of the land, right? And we're saying that someone's sexuality is protected information. So therefore, if I share that with you, Pastor, then you're the custodian of that information. And there's a fiduciary duty of trust for you not to share that information unless the law allows you to do so. So therefore, the question now is therefore, if I'm about to get married to someone, in spite of my sexuality, so for example, I want to marry to a female, but I am sort of homosexual, so therefore you say, well, that's not allowed. I need to tell this lady, right? But I didn't give you consent. So therefore, you got your religious doctrinal view and your conscience and the law. To be honest with you, I don't know the answer to that, right? Because some of these cases would have to be tested in court. Yeah? No, he has an obligation religiously, not lawfully, right? So unless you can use, so for example, the data protection standards in terms of purposes to share this information, right, would be if the law says you can do it, I've given you consent, or you can demonstrate it's in the public interest, right? So therefore, when I said I wasn't sure in terms of where the public interest conclusion will come down on that, right? Is it in the public interest to share that? Because I think what the Act it does, right, is promote transparency, and it's about fairness. It would be transparent and fair, right, for you to tell me that information, I have to share it. And if I said, no, you can't, right, then therefore you can recuse yourself from that wedding ceremony. And say, well, when in that case, I can't marry you, right? That is my answer. Yeah?
Jamaica, but isn't there a law, thank you, a law in the world, somewhere in the world that says you can't discriminate by refusing to marry a homosexual?
I am not aware of that law in Jamaica, because as far as I'm aware, and we're probably digressing a bit, but as far as I am aware, homosexuality is still against the laws of Jamaica. Yeah? Homosexuality is not legalized in Jamaica. So therefore, I would be surprised if there's a law that says you can't marry an homosexual, because it's not against the law. The law is consistent, right? So I think the answer to your question is, you should tell the brother or the sister, and the onus is on them to share it, or you need to share it. And if I refuse to give you the consent to do so, you'll have to say, well, I can't conduct the marriage ceremony. But you cannot share that information unless the law says you can. And it's the public interest is the only ground I can think about. And I do not think it's in the public interest to share that, right? Because the sister is not the public and it's not causing harm in terms of, this is not like a pedophile or someone who's about to harm her, right? Well, you could argue that you could harm her emotionally, but the answer is it's about transparency, and transparency trumps everything, and fairness in terms of handling that information. Go ahead.
Yes, I'll bypass the one on the harm. We can debate that one. If you use the counseling forms, so we have premarital counseling forms, and one of the things is asks both parties for transparency with each other on certain things. And that it deals with sexuality, it deals with a number of things. And the point of it is not for public knowledge, but for the person you're going to marry to know, so that they know what they're getting into. So that is how it is currently addressed. So it amounts to consent, informed consent of the party. So if we enact laws to prevent that now, then we have another problem. But that is how we would address it.
Right. So absolutely. So if it's informed consent, that's fine because that's inconsistent with the Data Protection Act. Yeah.
If I may say, the other thing is for churches, what churches may want to look on what we indicate on membership forms as to our beliefs regarding family life, sexual behavior, activity, and so on, so that it is clear that this is the belief system of the church, because it then prevents somebody from, well, it raises the issue of whether somebody is trying to be deceitful.
Yes, but you see, because I attend your church, it doesn't mean I sign up to all of the belief systems.
Yeah, but
so consent, you see, under the Act, it spells out the definition of consent. It has to be unequivocal, freely given, right? And it also can be withdrawn at any time in the same way it was given. So the fact that someone signs a, prior request or whatever request form, it doesn't mean consent is for all time in perpetuity, and once given, can it be taken back? It can be withdrawn, right? So really it's about these principles which I'll come on to, transparency and fairness. And really it's saying, how would you like to be treated, right? If the shoe was on the other foot, the tables were turned, how would you like to be treated, right? In terms of fairness, in terms of how your information is handled. So by failing to protect someone's information, contact details, which the SNARA gave, a person, contact details of someone fleeing domestic violence can be disclosed accidentally to the perpetrator of domestic violence or to someone who could pass information to them and they could cause harm to the victim, right? Confidential information revealed during confession, shared verbally, could cause distress, embarrassment, emotional, mental distress to persons. Depending on what they shared and how it was disclosed, a person could harm themselves, right? Those who are mentally unstable and vulnerable would take their own lives. Yeah, that's a very extreme. But that's what embarrassment could do to people. You know, the church membership list access during burglary is not different from what you've said during burglary. Video image of a person seeking refuge is released on YouTube or Zoom. And I said I'll answer that question at the end. So here are some, I'll take another question there. Absolutely.
Identity theft based on the amount of information you have collected.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a really good point because identity theft, right? So it says about, again, think about what information that you have about someone, right? But also to steal someone's identity. Not that I've done it or I'm teaching anyone how to do it, right? But it's really, it's about how, it's like a jigsaw puzzle, right? So it may be that all you have or disclose about someone maybe is their place of birth, right? Because the person who is looking to steal their identity have already have their mother's name, maiden name. They've already obtained their name from somebody else. And all they need is to complete this puzzle. And they're looking for just one more piece of information. And that's the information you've disclosed. You see? So any information we have about people, it's really saying you should protect it. It doesn't mean you have everything, but any personal information about anyone must be protected. So here are some key compliance requirements of the Act. Organizations who are data controllers or sole traders must be registered with the Office of the Information Commissioner when the registration portal opens by or thereabout the 1st of June onwards. Every year, the data controller must also complete a data protection impact assessment, which is a risk assessment. The church, and it depends on the size of the church, must appoint a data protection officer. The data protection officer is the guardian of the Data Protection Act. In other words, they're to help the church to comply and to train people to keep up to date with the laws, to liaise with the Information Commissioner, and to liaise with data subjects. Now, every data controller doesn't have to appoint a data protection officer. Only if you handle information on what the law calls a large scale. So in other words, if you handle information like some churches, hundreds of members across different parishes, then that's large scale. Or if you handle sensitive information, so sensitive information, someone's sexual orientation, religious views, etc., then the protection officer, and also government bodies. So for those of you who work in government institutions, government bodies must appoint a data protection officer. And also to comply with the data protection standards and to comply with the rights of data subjects. So here are the data protection standards. So in the 1998 Data Protection Act, which I referred to in the UK, these are called data protection principles. It's the same thing, just a different terminology, right? So in other words, these are your guiding steps to determine whether to collect and how to use information about people. These are the standards. These are the principles to abide by. I'll go through them shortly, in brief. So first one, if you're collecting information about someone, using it and sharing it, it must be done in a fair and lawful manner. Lawfully is easy because you can point to a law that says you're allowed to do so. So for example, if you're an employer you're collecting someone's employment history or someone's bank details. The law says you can do that in line with the Employment Act or legislations. You need to share information with the government for tax purposes. Yeah, there's a law says you can do that. But is it fair? In other words, how much are you collecting? And are you asking for too much information that's not necessary? And also the scenario that we discuss in terms of the church sharing information, is it fair? Is it just? Is it ethical? So not because you can do it, the other question is, should you do it? Yeah, and that's only a question you could answer based on what's proportionate and reasonable. So it must be fair. People must be treated fairly, and that's what the law says. The second one is around purpose limitation. So why are you collecting it? So if you're collecting information, is okay, it's a wedding ceremony. You need their bride and groom name, you need a father's last name, you need the date of birth, you need what else? Occupation, right? That's all you need. What if you ask about sexuality? What about if you ask about, I don't know, how many times have they been married before? You probably will need that one actually, because there's a law against bigamy, right? So, but if you start asking for irrelevant information, like how many degrees they have, you know, or where did they go to school, or how many siblings do they have, that's not relevant, you see. And it means also that if you are being asked this information as a data subject, you can question the person who is asking you, why do you need it? Right? Purpose limitation. It must be collected for a specified purpose. And then the third one, it says, in order to fulfill your purpose, you only should ask for the amount that you need. So don't go asking for collecting a lot of information that's not relevant to your purpose. You know, and because there's a risk, because it means that once you have it, you have to protect it, right? And therefore, the more you have, is the more you are at risk. And also, if I ask you for a copy or copies of my information, you've got more information to troll through and to prepare to provide back to me. So you see, it's in your interest to collect the very minimum that you need to fulfill your purpose. And if you have it, it should be accurate. So therefore, if you have my email address, well, the onus is on me to tell you if I've changed it or changed my address. But say, for example, you collect information from a third party about me. How do you know it's accurate, right? So it's about having systems in place to check the information that you have and to review and update that information periodically on a regular basis. And then number 5, I'll come to you after this list. Number 5, it's saying there must be a period for which you should keep this information and no longer. Now, the law, the Act does not tell you what that period is. It says you should only keep it for as long as is necessary. So, for example, in the employment context, you could have information for the duration of someone's employment. Of course, obviously, you need that information. After employment, for example, the jurisdiction I came from, it said you can keep information about someone's employment for 6 years after they've left. And that's because the Limitation Act says they've got up to 6 years to take legal action, right? There may be other laws in Jamaica that allows you to keep certain information for certain periods of time. So for example, tax information can be kept for 7 years for tax purposes. So if you need information for auditing purposes, then of course you keep your information for auditing purposes. But once you've audited, why do you need to keep that information? So you see, every information that you have about someone, you must have a reason to have to keep it, but it should only be kept for as long as you need it. Doesn't mean you keep it because you have it forever, in eternity. Yeah. You must also comply with the rights of data subjects. And data subjects, you yourselves, me, anyone, any person, have certain rights, such as the right to be informed, the right of access. So if I ask you, people will ask the church for copies of the information, the church will have to provide it. Yeah. The right also to secure that information. We've said a lot about this already. So if it's on a list, it should be locked away. But also, if it's on a list, what else information is on that list? How do you separate very sensitive from non-sensitive? You know, and also it's around both pragmatism. So information that is very anodyne, is not very sensitive, you would need to take the precaution that you would take for very sensitive information. So in other words, a risk analysis should be carried out. On paper, yes, but sometimes people can do this just in your head, you know. Think about if this was your information, right? How would you like to be protected? Right, what could happen if this information goes into the wrong hand? Right, so this information is very sensitive. So it means I've got to lock this away in a vault, not just in a small cabinet, right? Or this information should be always in this safe. And also, I should have the key, pastor should have the key, no one else, right? Or if someone is accessing this information, there's, if you like, a book that the person signs to show who accessed and when. If someone is removing this information from a site, it's signed off by X person. It is transported in a secure container, right? We know it's returned because we've signed it back in, right? So these are the practical steps you take, depending on the sensitivity of the data and also the impact it could have on the data subject if it's lost or stolen or accessed in an unauthorized manner. Also, sharing internationally, it should only be shared if there are certain laws in place with the receiving country or the receiving person signs, for example, a contract as to how they will protect this information. Go ahead with your question.
If one should refuse giving a certain information, would you still get through with whatever you're seeking?
Go ahead.
Say, for instance, I think that something on your form is really not necessary. Could I refuse putting that info there and still get through? Would that be my right?
Yes, good point. Thank you. You should certainly flag it. If you think something is in a form that you don't like, you should highlight it. But also, I wouldn't want to tell you to refuse because it depends on what that form is for, right? Because, so for example, you're applying for a visa, yeah? If you refuse to put certain information, you won't get the visa, yeah? So you've got to think about, against the purpose, limited purpose. What is the form for? Why is that information being requested? Those are questions to ask. If you're unsure, you've got a right to ask why that information is being requested.
I'm just saying, that was just so in my mind because the financial institutions, insurance companies, They lie because they tell you that it's in response to the government. There's a information thing with the financial services. But all the forms from the various institutions, they're different. So I'm saying if this is in direct response to a request from the government, why isn't it standardized? And this is an ongoing thing with me currently. So to get insurance for the church, a whole heap of questions I get. I'm saying, what is this? Because then this other company doesn't ask for it. And you're both saying the basis for these questions is because the government requires it on the, I forget the name of that requirement.
Right. Thank you. So we're going to take a break after this question. But really, two things I want to clarify is that the Data Protection Act only applies to personal data. So it doesn't apply to business related or the church general corporate information. It doesn't apply to corporate information, only information about people that will identify someone. Yeah, just to clarify that. And then the other point is that really it's about why information being requested, you know, is there a law, is there a purpose by that organization, and have they explained it to you? You know, so think about those things before you refuse to provide information. But if you are in doubt, you can also, there's a regulator now in place, the Information Commissioner, right? If you were to lodge a complaint with the organization and the complaint was not responded to or addressed to your satisfaction, you can approach the Office of the Information Commissioner. They are the regulator. Okay, so let's take a break there and then we'll resume.
That's been a whole, what time we're gonna resume? We're just taking about a 10-15 minute break because he has another engagement I think goes. So how's the information been? I know we're doing a crash course in terms of what law says and especially for churches, what is happening is that, as I said at the beginning, a lot of churches are not aware of what the law says and how to comply. And so, for lack of knowledge, what? We will not perish as the church because we'll find a way to work through it. There's a question that I needed to ask. The church will have to do all of this, boss? All of what you just said, all of these things. Does the church really have to be compliant?
Yes. Yes.
When you reach the last page, you'll understand why. All right, so we have some light refreshments through the door. Some tea and water and the sandwiches are coming. So light refreshment. As I said in the beginning, there are some serious penalties there that he will explain to you about. So we're just taking a break that you can get up, walk around. If you need to have a cup of tea, there's water and different things. And we will, yes, yes, you can make the contribution, a free will contribution. You can go online, or you can give us the money, or if you want to make a transfer, I'll tell you how to do that in terms of the material. All right, so, one quick question as we take our break. Can I just do a quick survey of the churches that are represented? I know there's Christian Life right here, so already, and there's Feltab right here. In your capacity or come as a lawyer as a thing, Jamila, you're a lawyer. As an attorney, and you are for Faith Ministries, yes, and Royal Ambassadors and independent churches and Inner Cities for Christ Ministries and Church on the Rock. And this gentleman with the glasses, you are New Testament, right? And yes, in your capacity as a businessman. All right. Yes. What church? Church of the Living God and overseer and your I love it. Yes. I just doing a quick survey. That's right, just who is here unrepresented. Yes, any, and other churches, yes. But it has been good so far, correct? Eye opening, so thank you for coming. And as I said, through the door, there's some tea and I think the sandwiches have come by now as we just take a break because he's been on his feet for a good hour and a half. Just explaining. We hope to be out of here by 1 o'clock or before, because you have another engagement you need to go to. All right, so true holiness to the Lord, we have some tea, different teas with water and thing for you. Good. if him did know, would have not put himself in that position. And he has made a vow to himself. Now go back there, but as many young people, I can turn away from going there. That is what I am going to do. So all is not lost. All is not lost. And as long as God is on his throne, things can go on for the people. Where's Nicholas? Brother Nicholas? Our presenter has gone. AWO? Missing in action? Oh, yes, so that's my encouragement. So for those of us who've been asking, you can give your love gift to Andres over there. Has been a great help. The second thing is we have 2 more coming up. One tomorrow in Mandeville, same time at Ward Avenue. But the one tomorrow is only face-to-face. The one on Friday, though, is going to be face-to-face and online again. And people have been asking about the recording. The recording will be there afterwards. We are going to set it up to a YouTube channel. And okay, so that becomes important. So Nicholas, you told me you had a engagement. It's okay, but it's your time, my brother. We're trying to get your laptop synchronizing again. So we can go. Any comments? Just to know, I need 2 volunteers to go on radio with me on Thursday to just talk about the impact of the seminar on you. Having come, would you recommend it? That is just before Friday. And then a journalist is turning up who is going to write about the seminar and its impact on the church. Any comments? Just as we await them to set up, just off the cuff, any comments in terms of how the seminar has been to date? My sister from Pio, you look like you're the church secretary. Is that true, ma'am? You're the church secretary? Aye, so she's a Berber. And Paul Faith is not a dibby church, and it's a big church. So tell me, how has it impacted you to date?
Thank you, sir. Well, it has been an eye-opener for me. A lot of the things that I would have overlooked before, it is really, but I'm thankful for it because now I can go back and share with my colleagues in the office and the persons who assist, on a Sunday, how we treat with information that comes our way, because we are exposed to all of what was mentioned, and sometimes we don't understand the importance or the impact of if it's not treated as important. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. But another thing too, we're going the way that in your Sunday school, you're going to have to start doing police record for everybody who serves. That is where we are now, The children ministry, yes. Everybody who is going to be serving in your children ministry is going to have a police record. Yes? Police check? Police check. What is the difference? You probably can't tell me. A police check, yeah, but you have to have a clean police record in order to serve. That's what I mean. Yes, that's where it's going on. Because of what is happening with pedophiles and that kind of a thing. So that is the landscape. And as people are responsible in church, we have to become au fait with what we see happening, or we're going to be left behind. You ready now, Mr. Nicholas? Oh, they're ready to go. All right. So, okay, sir.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. I've enjoyed the first session. I hope you did as well. There's a question there. Go ahead.
In terms of cross-border, people are now purchasing on Amazon. And their information are there in terms of, is there an agreement, cross-border agreement in terms of data protection being protected between cross-border, like US and Jamaica?
Right, thank you. There are 2 different points in that question around cross-border transfer and sharing of information. So I guess one you're talking about maybe in terms of governments, right? So certain countries in the world are categorized or in terms of assessed as having sufficient safeguards in place to protect personal data, so they call adequacy decisions, you know. So in other words, you can share information, for example, to the UK, to countries within the European Union, because they are deemed, like Uruguay, Argentina, Israel, etc., Japan, you know, they're deemed by the European Commission to have adequate safeguards in place to protect personal data, so you can share it without any concerns. Those countries who don't have, if you like, assessed adequacy decisions, then if you are the exporting organization or person sending information, so for example, to North Korea, right? There should be someone in North Korea, that person who's receiving it, to sign a contract to say, well, you're abiding by these requirements of the Jamaica Data Protection Act or relevant Data Protection Act to secure information in this way. Yeah, or me as a direct data subject should give you my consent, informed consent to do so. Yeah, but also, again, the Data Protection Act don't prevent, you know, sort of the handling of information for legitimate purposes. So for example, if it's a matter of life or death situation, you share information because the law allows you to do so. Yeah, so we can have further discussions about it. Does that answer your question in any way, Ben? To some extent, go ahead. So go ahead.
This question is premature, but I'm
Yeah.
gonna ask it nonetheless. So two questions. For some churches that do like online ministries and may collect information online on residents of other countries that are protected by their data protection laws there, are there any implication in this act for our responsibility to non-nationals? That's one.
Yes.
The second question is as it relates to some, well, churches or organizations that use customer information systems that are resident in other countries, and they become in the data processor in that country. So now the data processor is external to Jamaica. And sometimes these organizations, they cover under just their general policies that most persons sometimes don't read, but sometimes there is an opt-in, like for instance, IPA, where you can opt in to ensure that they govern the data under IPA. Was wondering if you could speak to that as well in terms of
IPA is just American.
It's American. IPA is an American
law, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
So the first question, thank you. These are really brilliant questions. So the first one is about what they refer to as the extraterritorial sort of reach of the law. So for example, the European GDPR, General Data Protection Regulations. Yes, it's for the countries, 27 now countries in Europe, European Union. But what it says is that if you market services or monitor the behavior of any resident of the European Union, you are caught by the European Union General Data Protection Regulations, right? It affects you. You are to comply with it, not the Jamaica Data Protection Act. So if you've got a website selling products or services to persons in the European Union, right? You are caught by the European Union laws, right? So that's the first part of it. The Jamaican Act has a similar clause that says if you target or monitor the behavior of Jamaican data subjects, you're also covered by the Jamaica Data Protection Act, right? So the other question in terms of the data processor who is based in another country, right? So if you are the data controller, if you correct me if I didn't get the interpretation of your question correctly. So if the data controller is based in Jamaica and you would source a service to a data controller in, I don't know, China, whatever, another country, right? They ought to comply with your instructions. Yeah. So in other words, there should be a contract in place that says you're sharing, I don't know, payroll, for example, if they process payroll on your behalf, or marketing, you're sharing information with them for these reasons, and they should protect the information in this way, as stated by the Jamaica Data Protection Act. And they should only keep it for certain periods of time, and should also have certain security measures in place to protect that information, right? So it's not about them telling you how they will look after it. You are the data controller. You've got the authority. You give them instruction as to how to look after the information. Did I answer the question? Sure, go ahead.
Using a Google Forms to collect, using a Google Forms to collect data on church members or whatever organization. Now we introduce a data processor that is a non-resident to this jurisdiction. So does my regular sign up and agreeing to the policies that the Google signing up with that email address, is that enough, or do we need to go further?
Ask about it. Google, who provides a platform, right, for you to, because in order to use Google Form, you've got to just abide by, because you can't change their requirements, policy as Google. They're one of the biggest big tech organizations, right? So therefore, again, it goes back to the question about privacy settings, right? Have a look at Google in terms of the policies and what they say in terms of data protection compliance and how they collect information and how they store information, right? And to ensure that you are comfortable with their approach, or don't use their service. Because again, it's about the balance of power. Is that it's not like it's a small man in the street. You can tell, well, we don't like this, you change it. You know, big tech, you know, one of the most dominant companies in the world, you know, you either use their service or you opt out. Right? So ensure that you're comfortable with their approach. Where you can change your privacy settings, you change your settings. That's why, for example, when I use Google Forms to collect and delivering training, you know, feedback, email addresses are not captured automatically, right? So if you're signing up to one of my training sessions, you would manually input your email address, because that's your choice. But I could set the settings so that it will capture it automatically, which I don't, because that wouldn't be fair in terms of how to handle your personal information. You see, so it's about how do we interact with these platforms and these systems. Okay, right. So moving on to another. Not sure this stuck on. Let's go. Right. So moving on to a topic which I'm sure you will all enjoy, even more than you've been enjoying so far, is around the rights of data subjects. And this applies to everyone who is sitting in this audience. These rights are your rights, which have been, you know, bestowed upon you by this act. So every organization or entity that collects your information, you've got a right to be informed, to be told your information has been collected. This is how, this is why, right? You've got a right to be informed. You've got a right to access that information. So you can write, submit by email or letter or whatever medium to the organization, to the church, to your employer, and say, well, you are handling my information. I want to have a copy of that information. They should, by law, reply to you within 30 days with a copy of your information, unless an exemption applies. Because as with all rights, right, most rights are never absolute, right? There are other exceptions. For example, the right to freedom of speech is not the right to say whatever you like. Because if you say whatever you like, I could sue you if you defame my character, right? And you can't shout fire in a cinema, in a theater, right? Full of people and you shout fire, freedom of speech, you end up in jail, right? So with every right, there would be certain limitations on the right. So there's a right of access, but the company could say, well, yes, we have your information, but we won't give you all of it. Because some of it is handled because we're investigating a crime, or because we are conducting employment restructuring, organization restructuring, or because we obtain legal advice on this information, so therefore it's legally privileged. So just because it's your information, it doesn't mean that you will get all of it. But if you're not getting all of it, they should tell you why and quote which exemption they are relying on so you can challenge it. Again, fairness, transparency. You've got the right to consent. So for example, to direct marketing, if companies or the church or whatever send marketing information, you can object to it or you can consent to it, right? Consent is one of the principles or grounds for processing personal data. It's not the only one. So it doesn't mean that if your employer or is asking for information, you will tell them, well, I'm not going to give it to you because I'm not consenting. No, there are certain laws that will allow information to be collected. Consent is one of them. So in other words, if there are no laws that allows an organization to do that, and it's not in the public interest, or it's not in the matter of life or death for someone, then consent could also be considered as an option. You can right to prevent processing. So if an organization is handling your information, they've got your details, whatever it is, name, address, whatever, and all the information that we mentioned earlier, that information is incomplete, inaccurate. You can ask the information, stop using it, right? Or if you shared it with somebody else, stop sharing it, and you need to tell them to stop using it because that information is incomplete, it's wrong, right? These are rights that people have. You've got a right to rectify inaccuracies, ask them to correct it. So that's why the right of access goes hand in hand with the right to rectify. Because how can you correct what you don't know? Yeah? So once you ask for it, you will look at it and see that it's inaccurate, ask them to correct it. It may be that an organization has written comments about you, again, expression of opinion about you, which is just wrong, misleading, yeah? You can ask them to correct it, yeah? Or you can write your version of exactly what the truth is. And also in relation to automated decision making, I'm not sure if the church uses this. So for example, banks, if you apply for a loan, credit, etc., where the computer makes a decision based on certain algorithms in the system. So that's what this is about, right to in relation to automated decision-making, where there should be a human involvement. Someone should be there to interact with the information. So in other words, the computer says X, but I'm reviewing it to check if that information is actually correct or is it fair. You know, so that's what that's about. The church don't use it as far as I'm aware. I'm going to go through this quickly. I've mentioned it. The Data Protection Officer as to who should appoint this and the reason why. So the minimum standards, I've mentioned those, some of these earlier. This is part of it in terms of compliance, raising awareness amongst the church leadership. So the church leader, bishop, minister, whatever, is ultimately responsible to guide the flock, to warn, to advise, to flag, right? We raise awareness. It's important because it's not just the ministers and the officials should be aware. Members should be aware, right? There's this law in place. We've got to be careful about how we handle certain information. By the way, these are our policies in place. We've got a data protection policy. We've got a privacy notice. This is what we do, right, as a church, to share your information, to protect your information. When you're giving testimony, yes, it's good to share, you know, your miracles, your experience, but you should also be careful because not everyone who's come to church is a Christian, right? Or have good intentions. So be careful about how you share certain information about your private life because other people could use it against you. And once you make that information public, the church is not responsible. You see, if someone comes in and decides to share the information in the congregation, you're not responsible as a church. That person has shared their own information, right? So it's good to really flag these things so that people are aware, you know, of how to protect themselves. You know, because some people post whatever they like on Facebook and Instagram. And for example, you know, I'm flying out today to Jamaica and they'll send you a map. They'll show you a map of exactly where, you know, where. So then you know they're not at home, right? So therefore, if you want to go and burgle their house, then there you go. They're not at home. They've told you, right? So because social media is there, it doesn't mean that we all should use it without, you know, any caution and just divulge everything that we like to share. We should audit, the church should audit its activities to make sure that you know what information you collect. At the very least, the very minimum, the church should know how much information you have about people. You should know where that information is stored. You should know who has access to it. At the very least, you should know what security systems you have. How many laptops do the church own? How many mobile phones? How many cameras, right? Who have them? Who is the data, the asset owner for those devices, right? You should know, right? Because not knowing is a form of negligence, recklessness, right? Or turning a blind eye. Because it means that if there's a breach, there's a laptop stolen, really? Because you didn't have an asset list where you owed it and checked how many laptops you have and who has them and who took it, you know, the last person who used it, etc. These are some basic, you know, principles and practices we should follow, regardless of the Data Protection Act. We should delete information that is no longer relevant or necessary. If you don't need it, delete it, right? Identify gaps in the law where you are now and what the law says, develop relevant policies. So I will end in summary. I mean, these slides really are about the services that my company provides in terms of supporting organization to be compliant. But broadly, they will provide data protection officer services, in liaison with the Office of the Information Commissioner, saving you the cost of employing and appointing a full-time data protection officer. We update you on legal updates and requirements and emerging threats, help you to map your data flows so that you can register with the Information Commissioner as well. And it means that you can demonstrate your commitment. You can demonstrate commitment to donors, credibility to donors, you know, to the community, build trust with the community, demonstrate your commitment to this law as a professional organization, you know, that you protect people information and avoid legal sanctions. And training, of course, we deliver training. And those of you who are here in a corporate capacity, employers, that's your strongest defense, but also could be your weakest link. So therefore, it's important for employees or for your membership, as well as your church officials, to know what the requirements are so that they can protect you, right, as an organization or you know, as a body. So what are some of the risks? The risks are that cyber threats, which is very real, very live in this age, identity theft, etc., cyber threat, where information is stored digitally. Data breach incidents. So data breach, it doesn't have to be deliberate. Mistakes happen, right? So if someone, like the paper is lost, stolen, accessed in an unauthorized manner, left unattended, that's a risk. Falls into the wrong hands. It's a data breach. Damage to someone's reputation damages the church's reputation as an organization. Loss of investment or loss of donation, right? Because here people think, well, this is a church that doesn't care about people's information. So therefore, why should I invest or support this organization? Financial penalties will obviously flow, and I'll go through some of them on the last slides. Civil suits, so you people, membership or others, visitors can take the church to court for failing to protect its information where people suffer loss or damage. And certain individuals can be sent to prison for failing to protect people's information. So the church will be expected to pay compensation to anyone who has suffered material damage or distress from mishandling of their information, and it could be fined up to 4% of its revenue or income or whatever. And that's globally. And as we know, some churches are international. So all of the information in your coffers will be subject to financial penalty up to 4%. No. Yes, per offense. Yeah. Every offense is treated separately, because if it's an individual, it's different from another person. Yeah. The personal liability of church officials, bishop, elder, whatever minister, evangelist, secretary, or similar officer, who, with their consent, neglect, connivance, recklessness, whatever. So in other words, you know this law is coming into effect, you've done nothing, right? Or you know this practice is going on, there's a loophole in your system, you know there's a membership list that's not secured, you know that everyone could access the office, you've done nothing. Therefore, you are personally responsible before the law. And this is not to scare anyone, but this is what the law says. If you fail to register with the Information Commissioner, the organization or entity could be fined up to $1 million. If you continue to process or handle information about people without registration, it's a fine of up to $2 million and 6 months imprisonment for the person who is responsible. You know, and in certain distress, cause for information, you got 5 million. Fail to comply with the data protection standards which I've listed, secure information or collect information when you shouldn't be collecting it for certain purposes, 2 million or 2 years to 7 years imprisonment, you see. So there are lots of benefits, in terms of compliance, because reputational enhancement, professional approach, you protect people, grow membership, absolutely. But on the reverse, failure to comply will be met with stringent penalties. Go ahead. Yeah, absolutely. So do nothing is costly. Yeah. I've been asked about by organizations, oh, it's going to cost us money to comply. It will cost you more not to comply. Yeah, because it means that you could be subjected to be more exposed and vulnerable to data breach, to risk. But also the church could be at risk, its survival, right? Because without people, there's no church, right? So therefore, if people is not supportive of the church, and bear in mind that every church goer is also potentially an employee elsewhere. So they know about this legislation. It's not like we're in a bubble, that the church is here and the church is isolated from society and it doesn't apply to the church. People who attend church also go to work, right? They have an employer. So they are told what the law is. They know what the requirements are. So if the church is not complying, they know, right? So let me end there. It's been very, very interactive, very enjoyable. I'll now let me deal with a question which I said I would deal with at this juncture in terms of live streaming of the altar and also live streaming of the service and the congregation, right? So I was asked a question during the break, just similar as well. So the advice is really, this law is not about being onerous. It's not about, making things difficult for the church or any organization to function. It's about what's pragmatic and practical, right? So transparency, fairness is key. At the entrance to the church, there should be a notice, right? That says, we live stream our services, right? The ushers, when people are coming in, obviously your members will know. Your members will know that you live stream, right? They should be given the option. What I suggest is that there should be a row of benches or chairs somewhere at the back, yeah, or in a section of the building, which will not be captured. Yeah, that's easy to be done. So if the ushers say, well, we'll live stream our services, there's a notice, have a look at it, and there's a link to our website which give you more information, right? If you don't want to be captured and video, there are some seats there. Yeah, that's very easy. You will find that maybe a handful of people will opt not to be captured. So that's practical. Service goes on. It doesn't affect service. They're still participating, but at least they're not worried because not everyone likes to go on camera. Some people are camera shy, So at least they're not worried, oh, well, I don't really want to. They're not focusing on the message, right? And the sermon, which is what you want them to do. They're not participating in the service fully. So rather than having that as an impediment, deal with it easily, right? Just tell them at the beginning, point them to an area they can sit. It's not covered, right? It doesn't affect church. At the altar? Okay. People will be told that, right? Does it mean that you're not going to be prayed for because you're not captured at the altar? What other options could you have? Practically, really?
That's an interesting one.
What's that?
What?
But what if you need to do that because you are hybrid service? Some people join on Zoom, some people are here in person. They need to see what God is doing, what is going on in the church. So therefore, we're not hiding it. That's one version.
We may have persons around, so sometimes you may need to have persons around the person who you probably interact in personal, so not too much of that person's information, what's happening to them be exposed.
Yeah.
Things like that.
So she said, these are conversations that should take place within your clergy and as an organization, as a church.
And then certain matters are move away from.
Yeah. So now we're turning it back again. If that was you, how would you like to be treated? You know, so sometimes there are gray areas, but it's really about what's practical and what's fair, right? So service goes on, but everyone benefits, yeah? So remember, the visitors will be told that you're live streamed, that the altar will be captured. Your members will know, right? Now, does it mean that someone who wants to come up for prayer, that will preclude them from coming up for prayer because they don't want to be videoed, right? So you see, we don't want to undermine what we're doing, our central mission. So I don't know, could you have another part, you know, of the altar where it's not captured, you know, where there's a central location, most people, but there's another little part that, so the focus is on here, but they could also be prayed for there too. You know, it's about what's practical. You know, the law does not provide an answer to these questions, right? But what the law does is provide guiding principles, right? To say, be fair, be transparent, and how we treat people. Go ahead.
It was a question that was asked earlier on as it relates to the WhatsApp groups, which for most of us already exist. And, you know, it exposes persons' numbers, because if you're in the group, if that already obtains, what can you do or what do you need to say to your church members? Since the group already exists and, you know, you put out a notice out there to say, you know, by joining this group, you know, your information is, your contact number is made public or whatever. What do you do when the group already exists?
Yeah, so it goes back to the answer that you gave. So can you repeat?
Her answer, I took what she said, but her option is not so much a viable option. There's a reason behind that, because broadcasts, when you broadcast, if I create a broadcast group, then I am the only one who's sending to that broadcast. Versus a group, there are different administrators and different persons may need to send out announcements and different things to the group. So if I want him to send out an announcement and I send out, he would have to have an individual broadcast group, and I have an individual broadcast, and anybody else who needs to send out information would have to have the same broadcast group of broadcasting information. But I take what she said, it does prevent persons from seeing, you know, other person's information, but it literally means each person who has that administrative privilege or, you know, works in a church office or whatever, whoever they are that needs to send out information, they would have to individually each create separate broadcast groups for that to work. But it can work. But
but it's not the starting point, so that the admin officers will be able to see the whole list. Go ahead.
Okay, in a WhatsApp group, and I mean, I am not a very techy person, so maybe there's an answer that I'm just not aware of.
Yeah.
But there's also, to broadcast, I understand. No problem with that. We do that sometimes. But there is the interactive nature of the WhatsApp group. The WhatsApp group is like the extension of the church. And it became the survival point when COVID was happening, right? So it's where the extra church happens. You share the devotions, and people respond to things and birthdays and that kind of stuff. Are we saying we no longer do that? And it's impossible to not have the people's names in that.
Right,
So,
okay, right. So I'll come to you. So what I suggest you have is a policy or a protocol, right? That will govern your WhatsApp group, yeah? That's a discussion to take place in terms of the church in developing that, right? That will address some of these practicalities. So for example, the joiners, when joining the group, there should be this option, for example, for people to opt in. So in other words, we as a church, we have a WhatsApp group, right? For wider discussion, collaboration, etc., right? This is how we operate, right? Every member of the group will be able to access your phone number, right? If you don't want to be a part of this group, then at least they don't join, right? But also there are certain protocols that says to the members, right? As a church, this is what we do. Do not share numbers beyond this group, right? You know, without approval from the administrator, for example, but also to the members, right? You be careful of what you share in this group, right? Because this is how it could be exposed. You see, so develop the protocol. So because it's an extension of the church, it's the same of how you would have a discussion in the church, right? Or a social event, right? You wouldn't uninvite someone to the church. People could come to church and steal information, but you make it difficult for them to do so, right? And bearing in mind that we cannot prevent every eventuality in relation to the Data Protection Act. No one can do that. Security, right? Forget about the Data Protection Act. Securing your property or whatever, you cannot prevent everything 100%. You can do your best based on information that you are aware of, based on technology and current knowledge, right? That's all the Act asks you to do, right? Take precaution.
Your name, the 10th of January. Yes. We don't have the year, but just the day. Would we be exposing the person to something if we did something? I mean, I'm there thinking maybe we should just do monthly birthdays now. I don't know. What do you?
Yeah, again, what do they want?
So,
right?
Everything basically goes back to consent.
Yeah.
You just have to find out from them.
Sharing are you doing it for the good right reasons, right? But sharing, for example, at work, I don't tell anyone my date of birth, right? It's not their business, right? Too young, yeah? Yeah. So some people don't want that kind of publicity. Some people are very private, yeah? So maybe all they want to do is to say, you know what? Nicholas is having his birthday today. Clap, celebrate his birthday. Or this week is his birthday, right? So it depends on what they want. Because you would know it's my birthday because I told you, isn't it? Unless you're going to say, well, I looked at the membership registration and that's why I'm using it. And that's not why you collect it. You didn't collect my details as a member to broadcast my date of birth to the congregation. Goes back to the purpose limitation, right? So if that's what you do as an organization, as a church, it should be stated on the membership form that we publicize the date of birth so that we can celebrate with you. If you do not want us to do this, tick this box so that you opt out. It's practical.
Yeah, well, you made a substantive point that I wanted to make to the WhatsApp group, that maybe one of the things that could be done is to craft that policy and that statement and send it out to the existing group. And and then periodically resend it at a particular frequency so that persons don't forget that they remain aware of, maybe annually or whatever that is. But I want to raise another point that I've had to deal with. Sometimes we have Zoom prayer meetings, and Brother Percival come and say, pray for Sister Jane. She's having cancer in the groin. And sorry, just making an example. And have to say to persons, did you get permission to share the name and the prayer request? Because you're not the one asking for prayer. And that sometimes this can become problematic in that way.
Yeah. Is this a good point? Is it a similar point?
No, this is in a sense. So this is a church, and we are all leaders in the church. But each of us set up a WhatsApp for different groups. Does that now becomes that each person that set up that WhatsApp group becomes a data controller? Does it?
Well, you're operating on the auspices of the church.
Right.
So the church is a data controller, right? Isn't it? So the church is a data controller. If you set up a WhatsApp group without the knowledge of the church, that's something different, right? And also bearing in mind that the Data Protection Act don't apply to personal use, right? So if it's just a social group that you set up amongst your friends and your close network, that's not relevant to what we're discussing, right? This is only for WhatsApp group that's about the business and from membership, and you understand, under the authority of the organization, right?
Sir, what is, if it is the groups within the church, established groups, councils, departments that have the WhatsApp group, will it still be the church's responsibility for that guidance to say share or don't share?
Provided it's doing the business of the church.
It is.
It's the church's responsibility. It's by extension an organ of the church. It's part of the functions. If it's just a personal social thing, that's different, right? But if it's about counseling or any of the services that the church provide, then yes, it's the church's responsibility. Yeah. But nothing I've said here says that the group should be closed. It's not about canceling or closing anything. It's really saying it's about transparency. It's about consent. It's about opt-in or opt-out. That's what it's about, right? It's about fairness and how information is handled so that everyone is comfortable. And priority is a very, very important one. And I know sometimes there are some conflicts between what you think the Holy Spirit will want you to do, or the Bible, to pray for someone who has a cancer in whatever parts of their body. But for that person, that's private, right? And they might feel uncomfortable, right? We don't want that. That's not Christian, right? To make people feel uncomfortable. So it's about how can we do that? You still pray for them. We don't need to broadcast it to everyone. And it can be done in a private manner. Okay, any other questions?
Going once? Going twice? Okay.
Syria, yeah.
Some persons use Siri, right? I'm kind of concerned about the information that this medium, collects.
Siri, Alexa,
Yes.
and all of these.
And I can't tell Siri not to share, so.
But even if you're not telling Siri anything, Siri is listening. Have you ever noticed that? Right? If you just having a conversation sometimes, right? Your phone is there, your laptop is there. You go and open Google. You will see these ads start coming through about a handbag or shoes or topic. These devices are listening, right? Google, the AI, the algorithms within them are listening even when you're not talking to them, right? Absolutely, it is, right? So again, be familiar with your phone. We all love these, call it iPhones and the sort of the new software and smartphones, but they're smart, but there's a price to be paid. To market information to us, then monitor our behavior, right? To target us and to build AIs, right? To sell, products and services, right? So we've got to be clued up. That's why the Data Protection Act is so important, right? Because it raises awareness with everyone about to protect themselves. Never mind the church or your bank or whatever, but how do you protect yourself, right? So there's so much more to say. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed this session.
Wow. You want to say the vote of thanks, boss? I see you raise your hand. Or you want to be saved? Which one of them? Yeah, you'll up your brethren. Yes, but it has been our distinct privilege to do this for you. Myself and Nicholas, and as I said, Reach Associates. People ask, what does Reach mean? For me, it means restored, empowered to achieve, empowered to achieve Christ's heart. Christ's heart was about the kingdom. And restored, empowered, achieving Christ's heart. Right? And the thing is, kingdom advance through empowerment. That's what we do. Advancing the kingdom through empowering people with information. So we're into training, making the connections because it's one kingdom. Not true? One kingdom. So I'm myself and Wando. Wando has been very good to do this. I really do appreciate your help. And we say thank you, and we say we take a free will offering to just cover the expenses of what we have done. Spread the word. We're in Mandeville tomorrow, 10 o'clock at 81 Ward Avenue, that's Mandeville, and then we go to Montego Bay to Fresh Bread Ministries, 40 Market Street. So spread the word. We need to get the word out there that more people, knowledge is power, right? I will not perish for lack of knowledge. Yes, yes. Sorry. Well, that's why we're taping it, and well, we'll see what happens, but this is the initial that we can get the information out. Yes, sir. Yes, it will be sent to the persons who, there are some persons online who are sending it out to and thing. And as again, if you want to donate, you can do that. People have done that already. Or you can go to Spur and donate online, because we set up a page for that. We thank you very much. Spread the word. And as I said, we need a couple of people who just volunteer, because there's a radar program interview lined up to say, how was the information for you? So to say how it was, and because we have to get the word out there now, because remember the deadline is the 31st of May. And after the 31st of May, government can do anything because they said they have given us a 6-month grace period, and you have been empowered. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. Andrea is there, and then you can do online. All right. Blessings to you. Thank you very much for having come. Yes. Andrea at the desk is collecting the free will offerings. And of course, Nicholas is available to do consultancy